Psychological perspective of the self. Psychology. It is a various way of understanding a person, and the therapist is a way of helping people understand themselves. Self is a reference by an individual to the same individual person. Psychology of studying self is about either the cognitive and affective representation of one's identity or the subject of experience. The self and itself. William James, a psychologist who introduced his document called The Principle of Psychology, his main concept of self are the me self and the I self. The me self is the phenomenal self, the experience self, or the self as known, and the I self is the self-thought, or the self-knower. It is a sense of being unique, sense of awareness, sense of being the agent or initiator of behavior. There are three categories of understanding of self. First, it is constituents. Next, the feeling and emotion they arouse or self-feelings. And lastly, the action to which they prompt, the self-seeking and the self-preservation. There are three subcategories of self: the material self, the social self, and the spiritual self. The material self is constituted by our bodies, clothes, immediate family, and home. The material self, according to the father of American psychology, William James, the concept of the material self is a person that identifies themselves while also being defined by the people they know, as well as the collection of items and successes earned through various endeavors and experiences in life. Material self is not only consisting of his own body, but also includes the different things he possesses from one's family, friends, as well as the things such as one's clothes, house, cars, gadgets, and even the amount of money he has in the bank. The loss of such goods or person makes one feel as if a piece of himself was also gone at the same time. Body. It is the innermost part of the material self. Clothing, the second layer, and the immediate family and home is the extension of ourself. The social self is based on our interaction with society and the reaction of people toward us. Social self is focused on sociology, wherein it is a study of how human society is formed, its structure, and how it works. People's interaction with one another and the impact they have on one another are factors to examine when considering a person's development. It's also crucial to recognize establishing the self, based on social structures, might help us better comprehend who we are and explain how our relationship affect us as individuals. The spiritual self is the most intimate because it is more satisfying for the person that they have the ability to argue and discriminate one's moral sensibility, conscience, and indomitable will. A person's will, intelligence, abilities, morals, and values are what manifest the spiritual self. It is defined as the innermost workings of the person's mind, the behavior, beliefs, and even morals that involves every aspect of the human as a person. The spiritual self is the most enduring and intimate part of the self, according to James. With this in mind, the establishment of a person's notion of what is good, as well as their ability to not only be able to stand on what they think is the right thing to do, but to be able to make life decisions based on such beliefs, is what William James considered as the manifestations of person's spiritual self. Conception of self. Carl Rogers is the founder of Conception of Self. It is a non-directive interaction because it believes that all people have the potential to solve their own problems. There are three sides of a triangle. The perceived self, the self-worth, it is how the person sees self and others sees them. Next is the real self, or self-image. It is how the person really is. And lastly, the ideal self. It is how the person would like to be. According to Carl Rogers, self-image and ideal self can be congruent or incongruent. Congruence between the self-image and ideal self means that there is a fair amount of overlap between the two. While it is difficult, if not impossible, to achieve perfect congruence, greater congruence will enable self-actualization. Incongruence between the self-image and ideal self means there's a discrepancy between oneself and one's experiences, leading to internal confusion or cognitive dissonance that prevents self-actualization. The conscious level consists of all the things we are aware of, including things we know about ourselves and our surroundings. The preconscious consists of things we could pay conscious attention to if we so desired, and is where many memories are stored for easy retrieval. The unconscious consists of the things that are outside of conscious awareness, including many memories, thoughts, and urges of which we are not aware. Kenneth Jurgen, proponent of postmodern psychology, states that the individual has many potential selves. Multiple selfhood is part of what it means to be a human, and forcing oneself to stick to one self-concept may be unhealthy. The true self and fake self. True self. True self is rooted from early infancy called simple being. The sense of self based on spontaneous authentic experience and feeling of being alive having real self. Fake self. Fake self is our defense facade, the overlay or contradicting the original sense of self.